Sometimes, everything changes in a single night. A stranger on the brink of death, and a lonely man sworn to save her. But could this encounter change both of their destinies forever? We're just a few steps away from reaching 1,500 subscribers, and we'd be honored to have you with us. Thank you to every kind soul who's joined us so far. With your support, we share peaceful, heartfelt stories that warm the soul. If you enjoy calm, meaningful stories, don't forget to subscribe. You're part of this family now. Now, make yourself comfortable. It's time for the story. As the crimson on the horizon slowly faded, the wind grew harsher, rasping through the dry grass. The sky looked trapped between purple and the color of rust. A lone rider moved forward at a heavy pace. The wide-brimmed hat on his head cast shadows that hid his face. His long coat was covered in dust and sand, whipped up by the wind. With each step, the horse struck the ground hard, echoing deeply into the silence of the night. This man's name was Daniel Weber. He wasn't much of a talker. He had lived alone for years and knew how pain and loss could shape a person. After laying his wife to rest, silence had become his most faithful companion. He didn't connect with people, didn't blend into crowds. A roof, a bit of fire, and a few words were all he needed. Inside him was a deep emptiness. Maybe that's why he never held anyone's gaze for too long. But that night, a voice carried by the wind cut into Daniel's chest. At first, he thought it was just the whistling of the wind, then the echo of rocks. But when he listened closely, he realized it was a woman's voice, thin, aching, filled with pain. He pulled his horse to a halt, lifted his head, and squinted into the darkness. It was as if the earth itself was groaning. Then he heard it again, muffled, weak, a cry for help. He steered his horse off the trail and down a slope. Between the rocks, pressed into the shadows, he saw a body. On the ground, leaning against the stones, lay a woman. Her dress was torn and darkened with blood. Her black hair clung to her face like a curtain. Her breath was shaky, her lips dry. But what struck him most was the knife lodged in her side. The handle still trembled, sinking deeper with every breath. Daniel dismounted. His boots scraped against the stones. The woman's eyes flickered open, her gaze cloudy but carrying a clear fear. From her lips came a whisper, mixed with blood. "Please, don't pull out the knife. Let me die here." Her words were barely audible, but in Daniel's ears they rang like steel. In that instant, all the silence buried inside him shattered. He would later learn that her name was Hannah Lee. For now, he only saw the plea in her eyes. He paused, looked at the knife, then tore his shirt to press against the wound. His hands steady, his voice unyielding, he muttered, "You're not dying here." Her body flinched at his touch. Tears spilled from her eyes. They attacked me. They didn't want me. They beat me." Her words came in ragged breaths. Daniel scanned the area. The tracks weren't fresh, but the air still carried the scent of violence. Footprints, broken branches, scattered stones. Her cry seemed carved not only into the sky, but into the earth itself. Daniel lifted her into his arms. Hannah was as light as a feather, her body slack from blood loss. He pressed her against his chest and mounted his horse. Her head fell against him, another muffled "leave me" slipping from her lips. But Daniel's silence was like an oath against those words. He yanked the reins hard and rode into the night. As the path stretched on, the wind grew sharper. In the distance, coyotes howled. Hannah's breathing weakened, sometimes fading almost completely. Each time, Daniel pulled his coat tighter around her, one arm holding her steady. The stars above shone like knives, the only light in the darkness. Hours later, the shadow of a small cabin appeared on the horizon. Daniel stopped his horse, tightened his hold on the woman. The cabin was quiet. Only the low growl of a loyal dog at the door broke the silence. Daniel whispered a word, and the animal stilled. Inside, the single-room cabin was cold and dark. He threw a few logs into the hearth, flames slowly rising. He laid Hannah on the bed, carefully unwrapped the bloody dress, and bandaged around the knife without pulling it out. The woman's eyes opened again, and in a weak voice she asked, "Why? Why are you helping me?" Daniel's face remained carved in stone, his reply just one sentence. "Because you're still breathing." In that moment, tears rolled down Hannah's cheeks, echoing in the silence. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire crackled. But Daniel's eyes were on the window. Because he knew, The ones who attacked her could return. And if they did, someone would be waiting for them at this door. As the fire crackled and echoed against the cabin walls, the night dragged on slowly. Daniel's eyes refused sleep. He listened carefully to the faintest growl from the dog, the wind hitting the rocks, the distant howls. Hannah lay curled up on the bed, her face pale like colorless paper. Her breathing stopped often, and sometimes Daniel had to watch the slight rise of her chest just to know she was still alive. A voice inside him said this woman wouldn't survive until morning. But another voice, firm, stubborn, relentless, pushed back. She'll live. And with her, you'll live again too. The woman opened her eyes. Her lips were dry, her voice barely more than a thin line. Let me go? It'll be easier if I die. They'll come back. You'll get hurt too. Daniel wiped the sweat from her forehead with a piece of cloth. His reply was low, but steady and firm. I never liked the easy way. Those words lit a brief spark in Hannah's eyes, but it quickly gave way to a harsh cough that racked her chest, bloody spit falling beside her. Daniel's jaw tightened, rage coursing through his veins. Whoever had done this to her, it wasn't simple violence. It was cruelty for the sake of cruelty. Even jackals wouldn't act with such savagery. By dawn, rain mixed with snow and laid a thin sheet over the ground. Daniel stepped outside, taking in a deep breath. The dog's ears pricked up, its fur bristling. In the distance, a faint mark caught his eye, hoof prints, scattered by the wind. Several men had passed through here during the night. They could still be close. His fingers drifted to the grip of his rifle. When he went back inside, Hannah was half awake. Her eyes moved to the rifle leaning in the corner. A trembling whisper slipped from her lips. They'll come back. You can't stand against them alone. Daniel caught her gaze, his eyes carrying a quiet determination. He shook his head slowly. If they come back, they won't find me alone. They won't find you either. They'll only find someone ready to fight. She bit her lip. It had been years since she'd heard words like that. A man willing to defend her. A voice that valued her life as much as his own. Shock and fear twisted together, spilling out as tears. Daniel didn't look at her, only tightened her bandages. But inside, he couldn't hide the truth. He was ready to fight for this woman. By midday, Hannah managed to drink a little water. Her hand trembled as she held the cup, and Daniel steadied it beneath her palm. Each swallow sounded to him like a small victory. She wanted to live even if her mind doubted it. Her body was still fighting. But at that same time, far away, a group of men growled among themselves. Despite the winter cold, the cheap liquor they drank poured steam and stench from their breath. They had lost the woman's trail, but one of them suspected someone might have found her. If some fool is hiding that woman, we'll bury them both, said the big one with missing teeth. The others burst into laughter. There was no mercy in that sound, only revenge. Back at the cabin, Daniel was setting small traps around the area wires, stone-covered alarms, stacks of wood by the door. Each time the dog growled, it was like a signal. Daniel knew this night would be long. By evening, Hannah was a little stronger. She tried to sit up, but pain surged through her body. Daniel didn't let her, his strong hand pressing gently against her shoulder. Not yet. Don't waste your strength. She locked eyes with him. I don't want to be a burden. He narrowed his gaze, answering. You're not a burden. The burden is on the ones who left you like this. Her cold stare melted, replaced with a warmth of surprise. His words reminded her of something almost forgotten, that she was worth something. When night fell, the silence inside the cabin carried a different weight. It was as if even nature held its breath. The fire burned, the dog growled now and then, and Daniel's hand kept going to his rifle. At one point, the dog's fur stood on end, its teeth bared. Daniel stepped to the window. In the distance, faint flickers of light appeared in the darkness. Torches. His heartbeat grew heavier, eyes narrowed on the horizon. They were coming back. Hannah's breathing quickened, her eyes widening in fear. From her lips slipped just one word. They. Daniel gripped the rifle, his face unflinching. Slowly, he turned toward her. His voice rang like steel in the dark. When they reach this door, the first thing they'll see is me. The torchlight grew clearer in the night's darkness. Daniel's eyes never left the window, his muscular arms gripping the rifle tightly. The flicker of the fire lit his face, making his stone-hard expression look even harsher. Hannah tried to sit up in the bed, but her body trembled with pain. Still, her eyes fixed on the door, her breathing quickening. In that moment, the silence inside the cabin was about to be shattered by the approaching footsteps outside. The dog let out a low growl, paws pressed against the ground. Daniel calmed him with a signal. "Not yet," he whispered. Then he turned to Hannah, meeting the dark, fear-lit gaze in her eyes with firm determination. "Whatever happens, stay quiet. I'm here." Heavy steps pressed into the snow at the door. 3 shadows approached, trembling in the glow of their torches. The man in front shouted in a raspy voice, "Mercer, we hear you. That woman with you belongs to us. Come out now, don't make this harder." Daniel didn't move to the door. From the window, he studied them. Hatred burned in their eyes like poison. Hannah's heart pounded, her lips trembling as she fought back tears. Inside her, the old fear she'd carried for years came alive again. To them, she was still just one thing, belonging. Daniel took a deep breath, then spoke in a firm, steady voice. "That woman doesn't belong to anyone. Here, in this house, she's safe. If you try to come closer, you'll be walking a path you won't return from." His words echoed outside. Silence followed for a moment. Then laughter erupted, mocking, slurred with drink. "And who are you to stand against us?" one of them jeered. "Just some half-mad loner in a rotten shack." Daniel gave no reply. Silence was heavier than any threat. That silence unsettled them. They shifted uneasily, raising their torches higher. Hannah clutched the edge of the bed. Her voice shook as she whispered, "There are too many. You're alone." Daniel turned to her, their eyes locking. She searched for fear, but instead found something strange: trust. His gaze was hard, but inside it was a quiet warmth. "I'm not alone," he said. "You're here. And as long as you breathe, this fight belongs to both of us." Those words struck Hannah like a blade, but not one that cut, one that stopped the bleeding. For the first time in years, a spark of life stirred inside her. Outside, footsteps multiplied. 2 more men had joined the 3 with torches. Now there were 5. They spread across the snow, circling the cabin. Daniel glanced through the window, his face unchanged, and raised the rifle. Suddenly, a stone flew through the air and smashed the glass. Hannah screamed. The dog barked furiously. Without hesitation, Daniel aimed the rifle and fired a single shot into the sky. The thunderous crack split the night, filling the cabin, sending a wordless message outside. Take one more step, and next time it won't be a warning. Silence fell again. Then one of the men stepped forward. "This isn't over," he roared. "That woman is ours. If you don't hand her over, we'll snuff out your fire and burn you alive in that shack." Daniel reloaded calmly, his voice carrying through the door. "If that fire burns, the first ones to fall will be you." The cold certainty in his tone made some of them falter. The big one spat angrily, slamming his torch to the ground. "We'll be back," he growled. He gathered the others, and they vanished into the dark. Their footsteps crunching in the snow faded with the pounding of Hannah's heart. When silence returned, Hannah collapsed back onto the bed, tears streaming down her face. You stopped them," she whispered weakly. "But they'll come back." Daniel set the rifle by the window, threw fresh logs onto the fire. Sparks rose, flames climbing. His eyes stayed on the blaze, his voice like a vow of iron. "Let them come. Behind this door, you won't be left to die anymore." At that moment, for the first time in years, trust crept into the spaces between Hannah's fear. And outside, though the snowstorm raged, it couldn't extinguish the quiet bond born inside the cabin. The night had settled over the cabin like a heavy blanket. The wind rattled the wooden roof, and the howl through the chimney filled the room with a low hum. Hannah had pulled herself upright at the edge of the bed. Her face was still pale, but the look in her eyes wasn't only fear anymore. She watched as Daniel silently cleaned his rifle. Every move he made was calm, yet carried the tension of a storm about to break. "They'll come back," Hannah whispered, her voice barely audible. Daniel replied without looking up, "Yes, with more men and with more rage. But when they do, they won't find easy prey here." Hannah bit her lip. The helplessness that had been piling up inside her for years began to crack at his words. "Why are you defending me?" she asked, her eyes locked on his face. "All I've brought you is trouble." Daniel laid the rifle on the table and looked straight at her. "I'm not someone who runs from trouble. As long as a person breathes, they have the right to live. No one can take that from you." Those words shook Hannah deeply. She leaned back into the bed, tears slipping down her cheeks before she could stop them. Until now, No one had ever looked at her like that. No one had ever spoken such words. All her life she'd been despised, pushed aside, made to feel worthless. And now, in front of her, stood a man with a face carved from stone but a heart that carried iron justice. Later in the night, the silence outside broke. The dog suddenly rose, teeth bared, growling low. Daniel looked out the window. Far off, shadows moved across the white snow. This time it wasn't just 3 or 5 men. There were more. Torchlight multiplied, winding through the darkness like a glowing snake. Hannah's breath quickened, her lips trembled. Daniel took his rifle and stood at the door. His voice was low as he turned to her. Don't get out of bed. If the door breaks, take the pistol in that corner. But only use it if there's no other choice. I'll be here. In Hannah's eyes there was both fear and an unshakable trust. Her lips quivered, but she said nothing. Inside, she felt as though she were walking a tightrope strung between life and death. Voices rose from outside. Mercer, this is your last warning. Hand over the woman, or we'll burn this place to the ground. Daniel's voice came like a deep echo against the cabin walls. That woman is no longer yours. She's safe here. If you want her, you'll have to get through me first. Laughter and curses rang out beyond the walls. Then another stone smashed a window, and icy air rushed in. The dog barked furiously. Daniel's hands held steady on the trigger. Suddenly, the cabin wall shook under a heavy blow. The door rattled, its hinges groaning, and Hannah's heart leapt into her throat. Daniel stood firm before it, his body a wall, his face free of any doubt. They'll kill you, Hannah said, eyes wide with fear. Daniel turned to her, his gaze hard but calm, lit with a steady glow. Then I'll die at this door, but you will keep breathing. The second strike hit the door, harder than the first. The wood splintered, angry shouts rising in the dark. Tears streamed down Hannah's face. Yet at the same time, she felt something strange for the first time, the weight of hope. For once, she was worth something to someone. Daniel raised his rifle, eyes locked on the door. Let them come, he muttered to himself. All they'll find here is fire. And with the third blow, the door began to splinter open. The storm's howl rushed inside. Torchlight spilled across the threshold. Hannah's eyes widened, breath caught in her chest. Daniel's finger moved closer to the trigger. In that instant, everything inside the room went silent. There was only one thing left, the scent of blood in the air, and the inevitable beginning of the fight. At the third strike, the door shook as if it would rip off its hinges. The splintering wood filled the cabin with a tomb-like silence. Hannah shut her eyes, a muffled prayer slipping from her lips. Daniel stood tall right in front of the door, rifle pressed to his chest, eyes locked on every movement of the wood. The dog growled furiously, baring its teeth, but with Daniel's signal, it held its ground. For a moment there was silence. Then the door burst inward with a crash. Snow and torchlight rushed into the room. 3 men stormed inside, their eyes burning with drink and fury. Daniel didn't hesitate. The rifle's first shot shook the cabin. The lead man staggered back, clutching his chest, then collapsed lifeless into the dark. The others roared and charged. One raised an axe, but Daniel stepped swiftly to the side and smashed the butt of his rifle into the man's jaw. The crack of bone echoed in the cabin as he fell. But another attacker was already rushing toward Hannah. Her eyes widened in horror as she tried to push herself up from the bed. Daniel crossed the space in a single stride. The man's knife slashed toward his chest, but Daniel's steel-like reflexes knocked it aside. They crashed to the floor, locked in a brutal struggle. Breathless grunts, fists, and the flash of the blade lit by the fire clashed together. Daniel's hand clamped down on the man's wrist, pressing with all his strength. The attacker snarled, teeth clenched, until finally the knife clattered to the ground. Daniel's fist followed, leaving the man's face bloodied. Shouts rose outside. More men were coming. Torches glowed at the windows, shadows danced across the walls. Hannah's heart pounded as if it would burst. In desperation, she reached for the pistol by the bed. Her hands shook violently, but her fingers found the cold metal. Daniel rose, sweat and blood streaking his face, the first man lying unconscious at his feet. He saw Hannah holding the pistol. Their eyes met. Not yet, he said, voice hard but protective. I'm still here. A scream outside. 2 more men rushed the door. Daniel lifted his rifle, firing twice. The cabin thundered with gunfire, filling the air with gunpowder and ringing silence. The men cursed and fell back, but they weren't gone for good. Hannah collapsed against the bed, tears streaming. Her voice trembled. "They won't leave. Not until they kill you." As he reloaded, Daniel turned, his eyes steady, unshaken. "Then I'll be the last thing they ever see." The firelight flickered across the cabin, shadows hardening Daniel's features even more. In that moment, Hannah realized this man wasn't just fighting for himself. He was putting his life on the line for her. And inside her, beside the fear that had been stone cold for years, something new began to take root. Trust. And maybe more. Outside, the mob of torchbearers regrouped. A voice tore through the storm. "Mercer, hand over the woman. Tonight, we'll dig your grave and hers." Daniel stepped to the doorway, chest rising, his voice booming against the blizzard. "I don't fear my grave, but you'd better fear not leaving here alive." Silence. Then laughter laced with rage. More torches flared. The cabin was surrounded. Hannah held her breath, eyes fixed on Daniel. In his unshaken stance, she saw the strength of a mountain. And in that instant, she realized, for the first time in her life, she didn't want to die. She wanted to live. But the men outside were resolute. A torch came crashing through the window, landing on the rug in a spray of sparks. Flames leapt upward. Hannah screamed. Daniel rushed forward, stamping out the fire, but danger was spreading fast. In the middle of the darkness, the small cabin surrounded by torchlight was no longer just a shelter, it was a battlefield. And Daniel, without blinking, stood at the door. As the flames spread across the rug in a shower of sparks, the air inside the cabin grew heavy. Smoke rose toward the ceiling, and Hannah coughed, pain tearing through her chest again. Daniel dropped quickly, yanking the rug up to smother the fire. But the rain of torches outside didn't stop. Another window shattered, this time the tablecloth caught fire. Daniel's eyes flared with rage. "They want to burn us alive," Hannah said, her voice shaking. Daniel gripped his rifle, eyes flashing like steel in the firelight. "If something burns tonight, it'll be this cabin, not us." The men outside slammed against the door again. Hinges cracked, boards splintered. Daniel planted himself at the doorway and raised the rifle. He fired as the first man burst in, sending his body flying backward into the snow. But the others charged in behind him. For a moment, the cabin became a storm of shouting, smoke, and fire. Daniel swung his rifle like a club, flooring one man. Another lunged at him, fists crashing through the air. Hannah pushed herself up from the bed, her vision swimming with terror. Then her eyes caught a glint on the floor, Daniel's spare pistol. Summoning every ounce of strength, she staggered to her feet, snatched it up, and pointed it at one of the attackers. The man froze, eyes wide. "You dash," was all he managed before Hannah pulled the trigger. The blast filled the cabin. He collapsed in a bloody heap. Hannah's arms trembled, the gun nearly slipping from her hands. But in her eyes, fear had given way to something else, the will to fight for her life. Daniel brought down the last attacker, his face streaked with sweat and blood. The room was choking with smoke, flames licking up the walls. The roof groaned overhead, the heat making every breath a struggle. The dog barked at the door, frantic. Daniel rushed to Hannah's side, pulling her under his arm. "We can't stay here," he said firmly. "We're getting out." Tears streamed down Hannah's face as she nodded. "I'm with you." He slammed his shoulder into the door, bursting it open. The storm of snow and fire blasted their faces. Some men still lingered outside, but the spreading blaze had unnerved them. Most cursed and fled into the darkness, their torches dropping in the snow. Carrying Hannah in his arms, Daniel stepped out. The dog darted ahead, barking, clearing the way. Flames roared into the night sky, snowflakes hissing into steam before they even touched the ground. Hannah pressed her head against Daniel's chest, sobbing. "My whole life is burning," she whispered. Daniel held her tighter. "No, what's burning are the old pains. We're still here." When the cabin was fully engulfed, Daniel carried her to safety. Together they sat in the snow, listening to the roar of the fire. Through her tears, Hannah gazed at the flames. Inside her was a strange mix of sorrow and release. It was as though her dark past was burning away with that house. By dawn, only ash and smoke remained. Daniel looked at Hannah. His face was tired, but for the first time his eyes carried a different kind of light. Hannah met his gaze, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you leave me?" Daniel stayed quiet for a moment. Then, softly, he answered, "Because you're still breathing. And your breath. Now it means life for me too." Fresh tears slid down Hannah's face. But this time, they weren't born of pain, they were the tears of acceptance. Her trembling hand reached for his. In the silence of the snowstorm, she felt safe for the first time in years. And on Daniel's face, a faint smile spread, a smile unseen for years. Between them, a silent promise was made. Neither of them would walk alone again. And far away, as a new day dawned, the smoke of the fire streaked the sky black. But ahead of them, across the snow, stretched a new road. They both knew it wouldn't be an easy one. But at last, it would not be a lonely one. By the way, we noticed something small. Most people who watch these stories aren't actually subscribed to the channel. Maybe we get caught up in the moment, or just forget to hit the button. But your support truly helps us keep creating stories like this. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel.